Pardon me while I have a strange interlude.
There is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art.
Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, my friends, to the AP Strange Show. I am your host, AP Strange. This is my show, and this week's show is brought to you by WFSR Radio, Flying Saucer Rock, bringing you the finest rock music from here to Alpha Centauri, from yesterday, today, and sometimes even songs from the future. So tune in through your pineal gland to WFSR, Flying Saucer Rock Radio. And tonight on the show, fittingly enough, perhaps even a synchronicity, is a man who is a musician himself and also a freelance journalist and music journalist and an author. He's written a whole bunch of books, actually. One of which was a prize winner of the Independent Press Distinguished Favorite Award in Spirituality. That was Mescalito Riding His White Horse, which is tangential to the book we're going to talk about tonight, which is UFO Symphonic, Journeys into Sound. The author I'm talking about is Mike Fiorito, and I'm welcome to the show, Mike.
Well, thank you so much. May I call you Matt, or should I stick to AP?
AP is good. That's just generally how people know me. My real name isn't a secret, but it's just,
I see. So I just blew the whole thing. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, AP is good. Yeah.
But thank you for having me on the show. It's really an honor. So really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. It's really great to have you here because what we have to talk about tonight is really a pretty unique book. I can't speak to your other books. Like I said, there are quite a few. There's there's a good handful in your on your resume here.
Yeah, and they have funny names too. That's I always love hearing people kind of say the title of the books, like Freud's haberdashery habits,
Right.
Sleeping with Fishes, and they kind of laugh a little, stumble through it, and it's kind of funny to listen to.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like I had heard a little bit about this and seen posts about it online before you reached out to me, and this is kind of right up my alley because I mean, maybe people don't know about me, but I was once a musician too, so and I've always loved the paranormal and the phenomena stuff, and UFOs. But I was curious about you. Which came first for you? Was it music or the weird stuff, or was it both? Were they always intertwined for you?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think they've I probably was first interested in music, when I was younger. I started out doing, believe it or not, Elvis Presley impersonations. I did one like in like grammar school, and it was kind of funny. I mean, my mom worked in the jewelry business, so she got me like gold chains and stuff. And I'm 12, by the way, when I'm doing this,
Right.
and I had a shirt open. Well, there's a one for money. And
Yeah.
that launched my music career, which has not really gone that far. But I've always been passionately interested in music as a player, and to be honest with you, I probably lost sights of becoming professional a long time ago, but I never lost interest in the history and the details, as you know from having read the book. And I have a broad interest in music. Really, there's really not music that I don't like. I mean, there's good music and bad music in every
Mhm.
genre, as far as I'm concerned. I would say that as far as my interest in the paranormal, that kind of came in drips and drabs, I think. It probably started, and I wonder how other people, uh, what their arc is, but it started with science fiction. I think actually is that's really I was very interested in science fiction, reading science fiction. 1978, I had a copy of the first 24 issues of Omni magazine,
Hmm.
and which was a science fiction, science fact. They actually published articles on UFO topics, um, on new innovation in technology, genetics research. So it was kind of really avant-garde, I think. And uh, I was drawn to in college. I was a philosophy and psychology major. I was very much drawn to Jung, but I have
Hmm.
to say I didn't really know why. And I think Jung takes a long time and a lot of experience to unravel and to penetrate into the deeper aspects of his ideas. Um, so, for instance, I mentioned in the book about I was very interested in Jung's alchemical ideas, his, alchemical studies. I was very interested, but I didn't really know why.
Yeah.
And when I got interested in ufology and the paranormal, and I guess we use this kind of the paranormal being all inclusive, ufology being a branch of it. Um, I began to understand, and this is from my perspective, that the relationship between alchemical studies, the I Ching, and the exploration of the UFO topic, which to me is not a logical one. It just transcends logic. So it's something that is kind of knocks on the door and draws you in, and then you go on a journey to kind of discover it. But it's not you have people that say, well, I want, proof, I want categorical proof, I want, disclosure, or I want, hard evidence. And it just took me, that's a long-winded way of just saying that the roots of it began in reading Jung and uh, learning about the collective unconscious, and it really flowered over time. But then in 2017, the with the New York Times article, like so many people, you know, that really caught my interest. That really caught my interest for the first time, being something that was a very public exposure of sightings, and there was the way it was couched and portrayed. It just really got my attention. And then I read Jeff Kripal's work, and I blame everything on Jeff really because
Right.
after him it just the avalanche and the reading and the investigation. I mean, I'm still swimming. That I threw that ball up in the air, years ago, and it still hasn't fallen to the ground yet. So I'm
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
on that journey.
Well, I think Kripal is one of those voices that we have nowadays, um, that has moved a lot of people who had maybe a passing interest in the phenomena, or the classic "I want to believe" sort of
Right.
folks that put it on the back burner. They're like, actually, this is pretty credible. Like, we got guys like Kripal talking about this now, and he's able to contextualize it in a new way,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
or a more palatable way for people that are afraid of being considered kooky for being interested.
Right. Well, he's given us the framework to talk about things that don't fall into what is generally called the possible, and to
Right.
how to include, and I'm sure this is nothing new to you, but to folks who may be listening, how to include impossible events, occurrences, and ideas into the realm of the possible. And if we look
Mm.
back in history, we see that this is, I mean, science is constantly re-evaluating, its findings and understanding, and this is just a fact of history. But when we're in the moment, it seems preposterous to think, oh, are there, ghosts or fairies or UFOs or inexplicable things that occur. But once you get on that bandwagon, you kind of make room for everything. You make room
right.
for everything.
Yeah, and you start to kind of see how the boundaries between these different forms of phenomena are uh, possibly just illusory, or at least looser than we would think that they were.
Yeah,
So I mean, I think that's why a lot of people have started referring to all of it, all the weirdness, as the phenomenon instead of phenomena.
right, right.
Which I think you do throughout the book.
And I used a
It's
capital P to give it. I think I had read James Madden,
yeah,
who written. Gosh, I took a class with him too.
right. You talk
UFO
about that in the book. Yeah,
hyperobject,
yeah,
and um, yeah, just this kind of giving it. I don't know, giving it a formality. I like to. He used the phenomenon with a capital P, so I
hmm
followed that. I followed suit with that. I thought that gave me license to do it.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I don't think you two are in isolation with that. It's becoming more common.
Oh
I
yeah,
do worry sometimes that people are kind of or anthropomorphizing it a little too much, and kind of or to the point of almost idolizing it, where the
the
phenomenon will
phenomena.
be a new
Yeah,
god. Like
yeah. That's what we do.
yeah,
Even as we break down paradigms, we get caught in the trap, the Venus flytrap of a broken down paradigm now reconstituted as a new paradigm, and I'm
yeah.
sure I'm doing it as well. Um,
Yeah, it's a kind of entropy. It's like things tend to coalesce into familiar forms or
yeah,
patterns. Yeah,
yeah. But to your
yeah.
point, just if I may mention, I'm reading, it's a really good book, Magical Folk by Simon Young. And some of these, and he's a British, I don't know if he's still alive, but these accounts of fey folk accounts in the UK. And so many of you could read this book and it's like a UFO book. Sometimes they actually appear as lights, as
hmm
orbs.
Right.
So, you're reading these stories and you see the overlay and how it connects with a this could be an encounter story. This could be an abduction story. They're
Yeah.
trickster like. And I'm reading, my reading has gotten so broad and so out of control that it's sort of, I need to rein it in. I don't know how. I need
Yeah, you
help.
got the bug, and you got the piles of books everywhere. I bet. Yeah.
Exactly. It's really an affliction. My wife is looking at me like it's either you or them. She's kind of giving me that look.
Right. Oh man, my long-suffering wife is a saint for putting up with it, because I just have.
Oh,
It's like it's time to buy another bookcase. Sorry, we
right,
just need another
right,
one.
right. Well, we've built them. And she's like, where there's nowhere left. We're gonna put them in the bed or something. We have a whole bookshelf that's been filled up. But you could also recycle and give them away. It's possible.
Yeah, yeah. But the way, as you kind of put it, you end up kind of branching off into a lot of different subjects and categories that you probably never thought you would.
Hmm.
So, and I mean, I look at my library. I've got books on like mentalism. I've got books on like witchcraft and all kinds of occult stuff, and old
Yeah,
back issues of Fate magazine, stacks and stacks of them. It's just like I want all of it, but there's always these weird little things that it's like, okay, I really got to chase that to its end, and you end up with books on subjects that you never really thought you'd be reading, but there you are,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah.
um,
And also as a writer, I think for me as a writer, it reading triggers writing, inspires it. And so, I'm like thinking of a new project. Um, but it's still coalescing. It's still kind of,
mhm,
it's not completely formed, but it's that pursuit, that it's a kind of like the lure of the fairy, into the forest, and you go out there and then you get yourself into a lot of trouble, and you're in a world that is upside down,
mhm.
and you hopefully find your way out. So, but I'm in the midst of that, right now. That discovery is such a joy for me. That discovery
Yeah,
process.
Yeah, and you're on the trail of a mystery, which is at the heart of all kind of spiritual and religious pursuits.
Hmm.
So, you know, it kind of hurts me to see people portrayed as just being, uh, well, crazy. People think of you as crazy for believing in UFOs, and it's like, well, you know, belief doesn't really have anything to do with it. Belief is on the side. This is a quest to find out, right? Like this is,
Yeah.
you know, but uh, to that point, like the question I asked you at the beginning of the show is, it seems like a through line for a lot of the people that you talk to for your book, like not necessarily which came first, but kind of how do these things intertwine in your life, music and the phenomena, and you've gotten a lot of really interesting answers in this. So, so for your own for your own experience of it, do you see them as being kind of related, or just uh, totally intertwined to the point that you can't really pull one apart from the other, the music and the phenomenon?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You mean in terms of my interest in it, or in terms of just as things that they're related?
Well, I mean, I was asking from your experience and your kind of conclusions based on getting all these stories from other people. Because for listeners right now, this book is composed of um, Mike's thoughts on UFOs and sound and like all kinds of phenomena and sound. But it's also there's snippets of his personal life and a lot of reports from other people, interviews with other people on the subject. So it's kind of like multiple books in one. You get a little bit of a lot of different kinds of
Polyphonic.
writing, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
polyphonic. Yeah, and it's
yeah.
it's yeah. So this the polyphony of prose that you get in the book is well worth your time. But yeah, I mean, from your perspective, do you see them as being inextricably linked?
Yeah, I think it's funny because when I began the book, it I wanted to contribute something unique to ufology. I didn't want to. There are great books. I've read many of them, and I didn't want to repeat what has been done. I just felt
Mhm.
like that would be that wouldn't expand the topic, or bring other people into the topic. Being a music journalist, being a musician, being someone who's deeply interested in music, and seeing the connection. And the connection that I saw was music is a language. And I like to use the word, it's a deliteralizing. It deliteralizes our experience, in the sense that music brings us into an altered state. Music and or sound, but that the sound part came later, to be honest with you. That was through my research and discovery process. But there's the basic way that sound takes us on journeys. I mean, it's kind of like a transportation system, I often say.
Right.
But there's so many layers that music uh, can transport us. And it's really the taking us out of our ego. That's the key thing. There's a kind of communication in music that triggers us to to get us out of ourselves. And it could
Mhm.
be something as prosaic as, remembering your high school, graduation or something, or an old
Right.
friend, or an old love. But it's way more than that too. And what I came to people with a very simple question. I said, can you tell me a story that connects something inexplicable to music? So
Yeah.
it was a very broad question. I didn't want to feed the answer to them. I didn't want to lure them into the answer. And so what you saw, when you read the book, and it was varied stories. So some people's
Right.
stories um, they were often associated with grief. They were often associated with death, but not always. In some instances, people had they had an encounter experience, and there was this incredible symphonic music associated with it. I
Hmm.
think there was one account that I read, and which is also in the book, is Orfeo Angelucci. And I
Right.
discovered him. Jung actually wrote about him. He was an American, and he describes he goes into a craft, and interestingly, he goes into a craft, and the craft itself is very small. But when he goes into the craft, it's this gigantic, like cathedral size, enormous, and it's a recurring theme of space and time being elastic and being not so linear in what we think it might be. And then he hears this most beautiful music. He hears
Right.
this, what he describes, and I'm paraphrasing, but just this symphonic, this most gorgeous music that was beyond description, beautiful. And there were some accounts that I had in there. James Iandoli, who you might know from Engaging the Phenomena.
Hmm.
James is a podcaster. He's deeply in the subject, and he's talked with all of the big honchos in the ufology biz. Jacques Vallée and etc. Also
Right.
a very nice guy. And his encounter experience, um, he also had something similar to what Orfeo had. He heard this beautiful music. He heard this just exquisite symphonic music. Now, not everybody hears music, interestingly. I mean, some people hear nothing,
Right.
or they hear a hum. They
Hmm.
just hear like this, they see this thing as big as a building. And it's what's so shocking is that it's the enormity of the object, whatever it is. It's inversely related to the footprint of noise and impact it seems to make in the physical world. It has a kind of, it could be completely silent or
Right.
hum, as I said,
Yeah.
glowing. And James described that what he saw, the UFO that he saw turned into, and he's not the first person to say this, it turned into kind of like a plasmatic thing. It
Hmm.
began to, morph and become this kind of ball, this more organic looking thing that if you touched it, it would undulate or
Right.
something. Um, so yeah, sometimes what really fascinated me, music is a form of communication,
Hmm.
and it's a very deep form of communication that goes beyond language. It goes way
Right.
beyond language, and it goes to the source of something in us, something that I don't think I answer it in the book because I don't know what it is, and I
Yeah.
don't think, and we talked about one thing this subject does, ufology, is it makes you, I think, if you want to approach it intelligently, you have to look across subject matter. So I looked across, read books on anthropology, musicology, philosophy, psychology. I mean, I don't want to go on and on, but no one can tell us where music comes from. That was
Right.
kind of curious. That no one can say. In fact, it is believed that our ability to make music, vocal music, other maybe rhythmic, preceded our ability to use language, which
Right.
I think is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of right at the beginning of the book. You talk about that a bit, and that is fascinating, and it makes sense because animals sing, like birds sing. Like it kind of
Right.
makes sense that the humming or vocalizations that are melodic, especially because like whenever a baby is born, what do people do? They sing to it,
Cool.
like
Hmm.
little lullabies and stuff like that. So it's always maybe that's always been a thing, and that's the kind of primordial instinct is toward melody. you know,
Yeah. But it
yeah,
sort of begs the question why. That's
right,
because it's an interesting thing. I mean, it's soothing. You could have all of your reasons for it, um, and it's not always soothing. Sometimes
hmm,
it's provocative, but it has this grip on us that's beyond rational. And it makes us do irrational things, frankly. It can
Right.
fall in love. Why do fools fall in love?
Right.
Um, uh, and there was something else I wanted to say about the origins. Oh, that's right, birds, because you brought up birds. And uh, the book that I had written, Mescalito riding his white horse, I did a lot of investigation into birdsong, and I
Hmm.
was just fascinated by it. And I don't know about you, and I've said this before in other, podcasts. When I hear birds, I feel like, we're just about to go into spring. And so the birds have returned. Even in New York
Hmm.
City, they come back. They come back with a bit of an attitude and they're a little cautious, because it's New York
Right.
City.
Yeah.
But they do come back. I live right near a park here, Prospect Park, and there's actually a big variety of bird types. And so you'll hear this profusion of bird song, starting at what, 5 or so.
Hmm.
And I feel like I feel like there's something being said and I don't know what it is. And I
Right.
think that it's kind of like what we began with, this calling. It's a calling because we're all sort of wrapped up in our everyday uh, ego, our kind of uh, everyday reality that the stories that we take to be true. And the stories that we take to be true, sometimes they're just, they're bad for us. Sometimes we
Yeah.
believe that we are a X or we're a Y. Sometimes nations believe that they're a this or a that, and that becomes a combative thing. Um, but when we get out of our ego, when we realize those are just stories, that's just a
Hmm.
story, you
Right.
know. Yeah, okay, it's true, it's meaningful, it has truth. I'm not saying that but it's not the whole thing. And for those
Right.
people, the debunkers and the poo-pooers that say, well, I have read, there's no actual, Neil deGrasse Tyson says, and I'm like, forget Neil deGrasse Tyson. That guy he should go back to school, really. I don't accept his positions. But to go back to the point of, bird song, it's so complex, it's so interesting. And I kind of feel we're not being brought into the intergalactic, sentience uh, society because we're not smart enough to pay attention to even the terrestrial intelligence that abounds us. That's all
Yes.
around. They're
Yes.
like,
And
you guys are, you're still monkeys. You're still.
the, well, this is what cracks me up when uh, ufology, or since the term now is UAP, I guess it's you apology. You
Is that
apologists,
it?
yeah.
That's a good
Well,
one.
it's kinder than saying UAPons. Like,
Uh,
but
I got to write this down. Well, I'll listen to it on the podcast.
yeah, I
That's
would spread
great.
it around. I don't want to take all the credit because then I'll have the hordes after me. But but yeah, NHI has become
Mm,
one of these new acronyms that people love
right.
throwing around. Non-human intelligence, and when you're talking about, when Stephen Grush was talking about evidence of non-human, or well, I mean, I guess he was talking about just organic matter that wasn't human.
Biologics.
Biologics, yeah.
Yeah.
Non-human biologics, he's saying. But you're like, that could be anything. That could be fungus. That could be,
Yeah.
you know. But when we talk about non-human intelligence or non-human biologics, like, we're surrounded by them all the time. Like, I have several of them living in my house right now, and I don't know what the hell my cat's up to sometimes. I don't know. I don't know what she's thinking. Uh, but other times I do,
Yeah.
and it's like, if you can cultivate that kind of um, uh, knowledge, or just pay attention to the non-human elements in the world, because I mean, talk about anthropomorphism. There's also anthropocentrism, I guess, where we're everything's about us. Everything's about us human beings that are
Right.
actively destroying the planet. And I mean, what did what did the UFO occupants say to Angelucci when they talked to him? It's like, knock it off, you're killing
Take
the
care of the
planet.
earth. Yeah.
Yeah,
As they say to so many, as
right,
this is such a common thing.
right.
Um,
And it's
but
worth noting too, before I
yeah,
forget, that and I think Jung points this out, is that he had kind of the perfect name for that kind of encounter, because Orfeo comes from like Orpheus,
right.
the Greek god that well, he's associated with music, and the Orphic cults were like the early basic drum circles and festivals of yore,
Hmm. Exactly.
uh, and descending into the underworld and coming back out, and then his last name being like basically angel light would be the
Exactly.
translation. Yeah, so
It was noted by me as well. It was a great kind of interesting, ironic coincidence, I suppose.
right, right. Because I mean, you're talking about, for listeners, Angelucci was like a factory worker. Like he wasn't he
Right.
wasn't like a sci-fi writer or
Yeah.
an academic, or I mean that was his real name. So it's just this is how synchronicity tends to work.
And
Yeah.
interestingly, his writing is very fluid. It's a very it's he has one of those writing styles that it's very readable. And I
Mhm.
read the book and I really enjoyed that book. I really enjoyed it because sometimes they're academic writers and you're kind of like wading through mud, and
Mhm.
you're waiting for the gem, and then there are gems maybe on the way, but they're so hard to read. But I
Mhm.
highly recommend his book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what makes your book fun to read too, is because you're telling a story. You're not getting bogged down like that, and you're talking to people and about people, and you're also sharing your own experiences with music. Um,
Well, thank you for that.
y- yeah, no, I really appreciate that, because it makes it a lot easier to read. Like you said, there's a bit of poetry to the way you're writing it. This is
Well,
almost
thank
an
you.
art project as much as it is like a ufological text or a
And that
spirituality text.
that means so much to me. If you Earl Grey, if you know Earl Grey Anderson, he's a great guy. He lives in L.A. and he is a director at MUFON. But
Okay,
he's very interested in the new developments in ufology, and I didn't know him, and we interacted and met, and I sent him For All We Know, which is a fiction book,
right.
and my previous book, and he said this is UFO literature. That's what he said. So
Hmm.
I didn't have to do any research. I didn't have to convey complex ideas of philosophy or musicology or psychology. I just told story. So I just told a
Right.
story, and or there were many stories. It's a novel, and I that was like the highest compliment. That's y- you know like you said before we started. It's not a typical UFO book, and for some people, it's not going to be the coin operated thing they may want because I mean, I'm just as much interested in uh, narrative and storytelling language as I am in the subject.
Right.
So I may fall in that middle place between someone wants mantids, they want a checkbox. I want a mantid.
Yeah.
I want a non-riveted UFO. I can knock on the thing, and I want X, Y, and Z. And I've gotten some of that feedback, like on Goodreads or whatever comments, and I just say, well, I don't I'm just not for that person. That's my writing is not for them.
Yeah. I mean, well, I approach writing much the same way, because if I were going for a broad readership, I would have to target audiences a lot better, even with this show, it's like, I mean, I'm not gonna slow down and cover things I don't feel like covering. I'm in it for the discovery of it and the creation,
Exactly.
and just following my bliss, like, and
Why not?
it's
All
the
right.
best reason to do anything, right? I mean,
Exactly.
ironically, it's kind of why I stopped playing music, because I stopped being fun for me. Like the idea of I mean, you're in the Northeast, so you know this. Like loading in at a bar
Oh God.
on one of those nights where it's just brick cold. It's like 10
Yeah.
degrees, uh, and
Yeah.
um, and then knowing that at 2 a.m. you got to load back out, and
Yeah. And then
worrying that
maybe
your
not a lot of
guitars,
people show up.
yeah, nobody's there because it's too cold that night. And
Right.
there was one night, it was like a February night in Massachusetts, and there was a regular weekly event happening that night, and I knew it was happening, and I had the option to go or not go, and they had a backing band, and I was like, man, if I was in that band, I'd be loading my amp into the car. I'd be worried that my guitar truss rod is going to get all messed up from the cold, and like,
Right. Yeah,
but
exactly.
instead I could just sit on my couch. That's much better. But
And
but
in
yeah,
New
I
York
mean,
too, it's like family and friends. By the way, it's
right,
like you're expected to bring a crowd. So
yeah,
now I have to bug my people I know. And I mean, if I'm playing a lot, then I'm bugging them all the time. And that's just not, I don't want to do that. That's
right,
not why I'm doing it.
right,
So if I do play now, but I play very kind of, here and there and happenstance kind of thing. I run an open mic, which is nice because it's zero pressure and I
right.
get to keep my chops up uh without too much commitment. It's an open mic.
Mhm.
They pay me to stop. All right.
That reminds me of a Marx Brothers joke.
Which one is that?
Oh, it's well, Chico and Harpo
Oh,
are
oh,
in
oh,
the club, and yeah, how much does it cost to get you to stop playing? There's like a whole joke with that. Yeah,
oh, okay. Maybe that's unconsciously. It's like I would never want to belong to a club that would have someone like me as a member, kind of,
Right.
that in
That's the
that
classic
vein.
Groucho line.
Yeah.
This was, yeah. You could pay him not to play. Yeah. But yeah. So are you mostly a guitar player or are you a multi instrumentalist?
Mostly a guitar player. I do play different percussion instruments. I do
Okay.
sing, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm not a bad singer. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna screech and make you wince. But I'm not like Steven Tyler with that kind of range.
Right.
Um, uh, but I like to explore my range and try different things and learning. My wife and I do harmonies together, which is fun.
Right.
Um, Practicing stuff like the Beatles or bluegrass is very harmony oriented
Hmm.
from coming from gospel. Um,
Right.
and you could say really there's a through line from bluegrass, gospel bluegrass that it carries forward really into the Beatles
Right.
through different groups.
Well, like the
Um,
Everly Brothers was a big one.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And their father, Ike Everly, was, a player who taught Merle Travis how to play guitar. Wasn't strictly a bluegrass player, but he's from Muhlenberg County,
Hmm.
bluegrass territory for sure. But Merle Travis was a kind of unique composite of everything. Jazz, ragtime, bluegrass, Western. What did they call that? Western big band. He just did it all. Merle
Yeah.
Travis.
Texas swing.
Texas swing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take me back to Tulsa. I'm too young to
Right.
marry.
Yeah. Bob
uh,
Wills and the Texas Playboys. I think.
you
Yeah.
got it. Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, I loved him so much that I named my son Travis, my
Oh,
younger son.
nice, nice. Yeah, and I mean, you do have a chapter about that, which I could relate to, harmonizing with your wife, because my wife and I do the same thing, and that's for us. It was the Beatles, but also like Simon and Garfunkel. That was
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always fun to try to do that, which also comes up in the book, um,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
in a different chapter. But yeah, um, where was I going to go with that? It's also
Me
funny that
too.
you brought up the Elvis impersonator thing, because I don't know if you knew this about me, but I, I'm kind of the go-to like weird Elvis guy, because
I,
he
I, I don't
oh
think I don't think I know that or I've forgotten it. I don't know. But tell me,
yeah,
please.
I mean, well, there is there's an occult Elvis book out now, which I'm
Yes.
like kicking myself because I'm like I should have written that like 3 years ago, because I
It,
totally
it's
could
writ
have,
it's written yeah, it's written by I know the I know
Miguel
it's not
Connor, yeah.
That's it. That's it. Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, it just bugs me because like I had an inkling that like, ooh, I could write a book about this, and then I was like, there's like a million Elvis books out there though, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
somebody went and did it and got published by Intertraditions. I'm like, I should have done it,
But
missed
it's an occult.
opportunities.
That's an awesome idea, though. But it's an occult Elvis book.
Right. Yeah, so I'm not sure what all he covers in it, but there is an Elvis UFO connection.
I know he
There's
did. He did see a UFO. There's some story.
right there's a book called The Elvis UFO Connection, and
Ah,
it's
I see.
really hard to find because they only
I
did
see.
one printing of it, but it's a lot of fun. I'll send you some of my writings on Elvis,
Please,
because
please. It'll rekindle some of my old moves and stuff.
right, it is fun stuff. Um, no, I think I was going to segue from what we were just talking about with the harmonies to another part of the book, something that was in the book. Oh yes, now I remember. Um, since we were talking about bluegrass, this is a big moment of disclosure for my audience, and I hope it's not too much of a spoiler for your book. But bluegrass is the preferred music of aliens, I guess, right?
Right, right. There's that long story that Mark Turner. I saw Mark on I forget what it was called. I think it was called Encounters. And it was
Yeah.
a show that was interviews, these really candid interviews, and really low production, just kind of the camera pointed at people. Tim Caney was another guy that I met through that show. But Mark had uh, these a series of kind of anomalous, events occur. He saw this woman dressed up. They looked like they were from the future, dressed up in like a space suit outfit or something.
Hmm.
And then he went with his wife to uh, a bluegrass event, and they all saw a UFO. So it was like a group of people that all saw it together. And then he was online. He was investigating this. He was investigating. Was there a flight? Was there air traffic? Could someone give him information on this? And then he went to some blog site, and there was a guy with a weird handle. And I
Yeah.
think I just came up with like aliens like bluegrass music too. That was just my kind of
Right.
summation of it. But there was some association with bluegrass and UFO, and I don't remember exactly what it was, to be honest with you. Um, but isn't that
Well,
how these things occur? These constellate of weird, inexplicable events. It's like once the fire gets going, the embers kind of disseminate. But you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I've referred to it as like a spider web of meaning. It
Mm,
just goes out in every direction, and connects all these different things. So these numinous qualities about things that we can't necessarily explain because language isn't the right thing for it. Like spoken language isn't the language that it needs to be um, transmitted through.
right.
Tones, though, or even something like dance or a certain look or color patterns can communicate something that language can't. And we,
Exactly.
right, and it's hard to put our finger on it. But all of these things, I think, I've long thought are interrelated, and it's like you kind of give uh, a lot of oblique views of it through other people's experiences in the book, which is the only way to do it, as far as I'm concerned. Like this
Right.
is
And what
stuff that can only be viewed out of the corner of your eye because you're not even supposed to see it. You're supposed to hear it, and feel it.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some sense that's awakened, and not to belabor the fairies, but often people just see something. There's a quick thing out of the corner
Hmm.
of your eye, and I think what these things are is we have this sense of what we call reality. We have
Hmm.
this kind of comfortable sense, and it's uh, Donald Hoffman talks about this, and I like what he says is our consciousness didn't evolve to tell us the truth. What it evolved to was to be adaptive. so that I can, get food. I can evade predators. I can obtain a mate to procreate. I
Hmm.
could, get the means of things I need to subsist. Um, but it doesn't. Obviously, it just doesn't. How could it give us? There's so much information that's out of the bounds of our sensory tools. I mean,
Right.
dogs can hear things we can't. Um, Myriad insects and animals see things we can't. There are
Right.
there are people that see things we can't. There was one of the books I referred to. It was a linguistics book. I read it and it just blew my mind. Something like about snakes. I forget what it is, but this guy is in the Amazon. He's a linguist, and
Hmm.
he's he's with one of the indigenous person that grew up in uh, the jungle, and that person says, "Don't move." He says, "Why?" He says, "Don't move. There's a snake by your foot." And he couldn't see the snake. His eyes weren't trained for it. Is
Right.
my point. His perceptual field. And so what these things, I think what they do is they're trying to remind us that don't believe everything you see. There's so much more to it, and
Hmm.
explore. Um, don't be satisfied with, and it's we're all I'm certainly a hypocrite to this. I mean, we fall into every moment we're falling asleep. We fall into the dream of who we are.
Hmm.
You get caught up in like your story, how much you hate your boss, or how much
Right.
you this sucks, or you're better than that, or whatever it is. We all do it, and but it's just a it's a false uh it's a false it's delusional, I think.
Right. It's
And
what Gurdjieff would call like sleepwalking. You know.
right,
Right.
yeah, I mean, Buddha means awake,
Right.
awakened one, and it's we're constantly going back into the dream, not the better kind of dream, uh, but the dream of the singular dream, the more flatter, less interesting thing dream of our own self-aggrandizement, or just our own. We love our suffering. No,
Hmm.
nothing like anger. You could just get so worked up about it, right? And
Yeah.
it's like an intoxicant. You just drink your anger, and it's
Hmm.
voluptuous. Um, but that's the thing that some folks in the ufology world will hear that stuff and say, "What the heck is he talking about? What does that
Right.
even mean?" I'm looking for things in the objects in the sky, this kind of stuff. And what I think, and I think we have we have a simpatico here, is that this is a spiritual path. It's a calling, um,
Yeah.
to of discovery of who we are, what makes us
Yeah.
tick, why are we here, the big
Yeah.
questions.
And one of the things I always like to throw out there, and I think I found a couple moments in the book where this where I found you to be simpatico with it, is that the phenomenon is like following a breadcrumb trail that just leads you back to yourself,
Hmm.
or it leads you to a mirror where you're just looking at yourself.
Right.
And I think that's just because even if you take spirituality out of it, because I mean, there's people that'll be scared off and think that it's a new age thing, it's some kind of
Sure.
grift, there's some kind of woo to it. People that want to be more rationalist, it's like, well, no, I mean, it's very simple. People that have encounters with UFOs, or people that have strange paranormal events or experience synchronicity to a really significant degree, it profoundly impacts their life and it informs who they become. So
Hmm.
whether or not you believe in a spiritual element, whether or not you believe the phenomena actually happened, it's intrinsic to our makeup as people.
Hmm.
And it's part of what makes people people. You know,
Right.
we're part of a broader ecosystem and a broader control system, right? So, uh,
Right.
uh,
And there's the humility of, you haven't one-upped the universe because you know it all.
yeah,
And there's some humility to approach things with with reverence, and not that we should not not that you run in fear. And like my grandmother, you would say like in Italian you would say, how are you? You would say non c'è male, not too bad. But you
Right.
wouldn't say I'm doing well. You'd say I'm not too bad, because you don't want to incur the wrath of it comes
Right.
to the superstition thing. But there's much to be said for that, I think. Still,
Hmm.
um, that there's knowledge is a quest, and we're even finding in science that and it's nothing new. You look at quantum mechanics, you go back to Schrodinger, and he wrote a book on he wrote a book on the Vedanta. I mean, he was so
Hmm.
blown away by what he was seeing that it was it caused a complete revelation for him. And the hard sciences we're finding, there's a there's a lot of gooiness to it as well. I mean, this whole
Hmm.
notion of dark matter, and we call it dark
Right.
matter, and it's so no, most of the universe is unseen as dark matter. We don't know what it is, and
Right.
that solves the problem. And I'm not anti-science. Science. I love and adore science, um, but we need to keep that door open, the door of our mind open, to not be
Yeah.
so categorical, I believe.
Right. I mean, if 98% of all conceivable reality is unknown to us, um, it seems a little absurd to completely discount unknown phenomena or unexplainable
Right,
phenomena.
right, exactly. I mean, and that's where Jeff, I think Jeff has done a great job being so sober. Jeff Kripal, he's so sober. He doesn't take the bait, and I love his voice and the way he talks. No, no, we
Right.
just impossible things happen. And we just, I'm not Jeff. I'm sure you're not listening to this, but I actually adore Jeff's voice. I love to listen to him. I wrote a review of his book, How to Think Impossibly, and he wrote to me because we'd been in correspondence, and I said something like, Reading Jeff is like listening to a Nebraskan farmer, and the like the ease of the way he speaks and the mellifluous nature of his speaking, it just is comforting. And I said, I think I
Yeah.
read Jeff just because I like hearing him in my head. And he wrote back, he said, I really laughed out loud when I read Like a Nebraskan Farmer, because I'd read that he's from Nebraska. uh,
Yeah.
but just I could see him sitting there in the wheat fields, the cornfields, like kind of, just sober, and not like a New York, hot wire kind of going on, and uh, um, inflamed with maybe too much passion, because that can
Right.
scare people away. Um, but we're Jeff will, I think, soon he'll be a saint of ufology, or as you called it, UAP. What was your?
You apology? Yeah.
I love that, man. That's
Well, it harkens back to the old Stanton Friedman line, "Don't be a ufologist apologist." Uh,
well, it's interesting because I'm sure you're lured into these conversations. I mean, I have two books now, with the word UFO in the title,
mhm.
and I get these funny looks, and I get these. And what I do is I don't take the bait. I don't. I just try to have a sober. Thank you, Jeff. Conversation about, let's talk about science. Have you read Thomas Kuhn? Have you read The Structure of a Scientific Revolution? Um, have you read the books of the quantum mechanics physicists who were perplexed by their discoveries? Have you read Goodell, who basically said that, in Whitehead, in their, and this is in the 20s, Goodell said there is no set that contains the set of all sets. Basically, he said that logic is not self-contained. It always has to
Mhm.
look outside of itself to make sense. And so that upended the notion. that uh, our science and logic and understanding, the scaffolding upon which all of our, mathematics and science sits, is not solid. It's not.
Right.
Um, and meanwhile, talk about forgetting, the awakened one. Wake up, wake up. I mean, that's been long forgotten. It's like, uh, it's funny that mainstream science hasn't caught up with that.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, for that awakening, that kind of Buddha awakening, it's not so much a process of learning new things, ways of looking. It's about letting go. It's about shedding uh, the
Yeah.
illusions, you know. Um, so I mean, it's very appropriate. But to get back to what you're talking about with logic is also ego driven. You know, a lot of
Hmm.
this. So um, uh, it seems like to me that my solution for that generally is humor.
Hmm.
I will mess around, and it sounds sometimes I'll try to come up with the most off the wall thing, just a completely absurd thing to say as a joke, and then I'll find that, oh wait, that was unintentionally profound. Like I can
Right.
build a bridge
Yeah.
to that, and sometimes that's how you solve the problem is just through humor.
I,
So
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it has that 360 kind of vision, humor does. And it does what it dissolves that tight grip of what the ego thinks it has on understanding. So
mhm,
I'm actually thinking about another book right now, and I want to make it funny. So I want to
right,
write a kind of narrative fiction book. Um, I've written kind of humorous stuff before, and so I certainly am not insulting anyone, but I don't want to insult it. I'm laughing at myself. I mean,
right.
I don't know if you know, about 7 weeks ago today, I fell, I tripped, and I broke my arm.
Oh geez.
And at my age, I mean, I'm 58 years old, turning 59. Um, uh, it was an interesting experience. Interesting. First of all, it was very painful.
Right.
And it was the dumbest thing. I tripped on my shoelaces. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
great story. I wasn't like hang gliding or, cave dwelling. I was tripped on my shoelaces, fell into concrete stairs. And talk about humility. And now I'm dealing with wrap your head around how it limits you, and suddenly you think that you've figured it all out, pal. Me being, you
Mhm.
think you're at peace with everything. Go break your arm. See, now you deal with being at peace. See how that
Right.
feels. And you're like,
Yeah.
it is very painful. It's very incredibly painful. And I guess my whole point is that it's sort of like life has a way of laughing at you and saying, you know, you're you're still wrapped in you're caught in your own trap,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I mean, it will throw a wrench in the gears for sure, just to wake you up a little bit.
And by the way, caught in a trap, I
Oh,
can't walk out because I love you. Sorry about that. It
yeah.
just it
Yeah.
just happened.
No, it's good. I'm never opposed to an Elvis reference. So
But as you can see, I'm much more functional. But
yeah.
it's been a journey. Um, there's a great
Yeah.
story. There's the woman that Jeff Kripal studied with, Wendy Doninger, I think her name was. So he was, what did he call her? His Dr. Muda. Dr. Muda.
Mhm.
He did his doctorate degree with her. And she has a book on, I forget what it's called, illusions, fantasies, something like that. And she studied, like Jeff, religions. And she has a book on Hindu mythology. And she tells the story of this guru that's he's enamored with his own brilliance and his own saintly kind of devotion and spirituality,
Mhm.
and he's standing by the river and he looks at this woman who's kind of pathetic woman who's poor and she has children running around, and uh, he looks at her and he sort of thinks, my gosh, here, look at me. I'm this evolved person, and look at her. She's, so mundane, pedestrian. And then Krishna comes and sees this and zaps the guy and turns him into her.
Yeah.
He becomes her. And then, as it is it the case in Hindu stories, the notion of time is very different. He lives every day, every moment, sitting by the window pane and the patter of rain and the child dying and not having enough food and all of the kind of experience that she has. And he discovers the wisdom in that, but it
Mhm.
happens after 25 years. And
Right.
then when he has that, after 25 years of every day in that minutia, he's zapped back in and then standing by the river. And it's a kind of, I think it's a metaphor for all of us, right? When as soon as we think we got it, you better look over your shoulder,
Right.
Non c'è male, non
Yeah.
c'è male.
Got to keep that evil eye away.
Exactly. Maloikia, we call it,
Yeah,
right?
well, like it. Yeah. Um, so, which incidentally, if people don't know, that's where Ronnie James Dio got the metal horns thing from. It's
Exactly. Yeah.
the Malika sign from.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? His grandmother, he says, she was the original heavy metal,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
heavy
mean, my
metalist.
Italian grandma used to do that too. She taught me that when I was very little. That's how you keep the evil eye away.
Yeah. Malachia, Malachia. Yeah. I have tons of stories on that stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we could talk Italian stuff all day. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you could think of it as that kind of evil eye thing, but also just there, but for the grace of God go I, and that's something I always, I try to keep that. It's second nature to me these days, but it's something that I had to train myself in a kind of in empathy,
Mm,
because you see the person begging for change outside the donut shop, and everybody walking right by, pretending they don't see him, covering their face, saying, "No, no, I'm busy," and it's like, yeah, I mean, that could just easily be me, or
yeah.
people in
Yeah.
really dire straits, so it's, and I think music offers a bridge for that, because if somebody can sing a song about their situation, it helps you understand what that is, that's one thing I love doing with songs. I'm sure you do the same thing or something similar, is looking up why that person wrote that song and getting kind of a little bit of background on it, because sometimes
Hmm.
it's really mind blowing. You're just like, I'm not really sure what the song is about. And you look at it and you go, oh man, this song I love is about this whole experience that I was totally unaware of before. But
Right.
now um, it's part of my emotional set when I'm listening to it.
Right.
So
And it could be little evocative pieces too. There's this song. Is it by Neil Young? Is it Harvest? And when you read the words to the song
right.
Harvest, and it's kind of it's opaque. You really
Hmm.
don't know what's he's saying, but you feel like he's saying something, kind of like a dream.
Right.
And
Neil Young is really good at that. He
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think the best it's funny because I think the poetry and the words, the lyrics to songs can take us to a place, but then the melodies and the sound and the music takes us even farther.
Mhm.
I wrote about it in the book. Um, well, I even mentioned this wasn't in the book, but John Blofield, who was I guess a Buddhist scholar, he wrote a book on mantras. And what
Mhm.
he said is that the mantras, they're not supposed to be words. They're supposed to be sounds.
Yeah.
So that if we get caught up in the word, then I'm caught up in an image. If I'm caught up in like egg or sky or tree, now I'm caught up in that as opposed to just pure sound. And it
Yeah.
sort of detaches us from the anchoring into a particular thing.
Mhm.
And the tones just become transportive. Uh,
Right.
uh, like the section I wrote about the hemisync um, technology that was used, well, invented at the Monroe Institute. And I've played with it, and it's incredible. You put those things on, you put a headset on, and you'll hear two frequencies occurring, one in each ear, at different frequencies, and it's very transportive. It puts you in a
Right.
hypnagogic state, and
Oh
that
yeah.
kind of pre-dream state that could evolve into a full. I mean, Robert Monroe had these incredible. Interestingly, he met beings who told him they even had a sense of humor, and they were giving him, advice on what humanity needs to take care of the planet,
Right.
and
Yeah.
sort of wisdom advice. Interestingly, isn't that a funny occurrence that these things happen in different modalities?
Right. Right. Yeah, and that same message often comes through. Um, so, what were your experiences with the? Are you comfortable sharing any kind of like visionary experiences with the gateway tapes?
Yeah, I did a couple of things, but um, and I can't say I did it terribly deeply. Um, I did it through the triad mind. So it's
Hmm.
something that Mark Cherdo runs. He worked with Bob Monroe, and he helped develop, as I understand from his own account, that he helped him because Mark Cherdo has a music background. He is a musician, and he had a kind of knowledge of music technology and recording technology, and he helped Bob Monroe to perfect getting the sounds right. But what I discovered is that it is unavoidable. You go into a hypnagogic state, and basically some other beings pop up. They just
Hmm.
pop up. They just kind of, like you go into a dream, and then you begin maybe conversing with them. I had a one of them, I think, was an old lady, kind of like an old strega, like old lady, kind of
Hmm.
like a grandmother, yelling
Right.
at me, and which is comical because it's also
Was she waving a wooden spoon at you?
was basically, yes, something like that. But it made me laugh because I there were a few things that I had that kind of experience, and I'm thinking, and it goes back to what you said, that when you see that guy on the street who's begging for money, that's you. That's also
Right.
you.
Yeah.
And these things that popped out of my head were me, or parts of me. And I guess where what I have begun to think, and maybe this will change, is that there is really one consciousness, and there are different instances of it, instantiations of consciousness, and uh, but coming to that understanding really through empathy. And without that empathy, we're just navel gazers, and
Right.
we've lost the way. But yeah, so I had these. You do have these transportive experiences, and in because I was doing research, I did research with sound baths as well.
Hmm.
Um, which again, you go into a studio, and it's kind of like a meditation center, and they use chimes and bells. Whatever you think when you walk in there, you are going to be washed over with the vibrations, and it's going to take you on a journey. It feels like you've been
Right.
plunged into a river, and you're just going to float along somewhere, and you're going to have encounters of some kind. Who it is, what it is, I'm not sure. Um,
Yeah.
but those are all modalities, and I guess that's really what I came to the conclusion that music is a contact modality. With
Yeah.
whom? I'm not sure. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of fitting that, and you do make reference to this as well, that in Close Encounters of the Third Kind movie, you have the tones are how they are in
Yeah.
contact. That's
Ba,
how they
ba,
communicate.
ba, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's like hand signals that I think they were like hand signals, but with tones,
Yes.
because that would make sense. I mean, I can talk to people from, uh, you know, from another continent without having any language commonality. We can speak
Right.
musically. We can understand something.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to pick on another movie scene that's not sci-fi at all, it's kind of like the beginning of Deliverance, where the guy shows up with the guitar, and you have the
Yeah.
kid that doesn't speak at all, but he's playing a mean banjo, or
Yeah. It's funny because I was thinking as you were saying it could be a few things, and that was one of the things that it could be that you were going to say. But yeah, or just the communication you have with people where when you sit down, you're a musician and you play, and it doesn't happen with everyone, but
Mhm,
some people, you have this incredible dialogue.
mhm,
Um, and there's information communicated. It could be, it's emotion,
mhm.
um, something deeper. Uh, there's something that you can't quite always put your finger on. Um, but I've walked away from playing with someone saying, wow, that was special. It's like a
Yeah,
great kiss or something, you're just an unexpected magic happened.
yeah, and it borders on telepathy, which I think you discuss in this, or in
Yeah,
the part where you talk to Josh Cutchin, he kind of goes
yeah,
into that as well because he's doing like a New Orleans jazz kind of uh,
right,
thing. So, um, but I've experienced that before too, and I mean that's one of the reasons music was less fun for me because I didn't have the guys to play with, and it's really hard to find guys. And for
yeah,
me, like
really is.
doing guitar solos was really my favorite thing, and if you have a great drummer, they can work with the dynamics and drive the rest of the band so that your guitar solo and the drum are like synced.
Right.
um, so when I did have that, like I'd listen to recordings and he would, there would be two high notes that I'm about to hit, and he turns it into kind of like a tacit, and just like with cymbal crashes and hits
Oh,
them.
right, right,
Like, how did he know I was going to hit those two notes? Like,
right.
but you're just linked up. So
Yeah.
it's crazy how it works, and nobody really knows how it works, I guess.
And there's this like everyday magic. And I think Josh said, was it Josh that said performing music is magic happening in public every day,
Right.
all the time. And but it's kind of looked at, we don't look at it, we don't scrutinize it. You look at
Yeah.
things like people watch, I don't know, these science fiction and Marvel movies, and all these kind of read books of, Harry Potter or something like that. We're all enmeshed in this stuff. But if you ask them, so what do you think about, you know, oftentimes people will kind of pull their pants up and say, well, I don't believe in that crap.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, we just, because it's probably a little scary when you think about, well, things are boundless and uh, way more complex than we know. And I include myself in that. Sometimes it scares me, frankly. Sometimes I pull up to go to sleep and I just, the profundity of it all gets a little, you feel like you're drowning, frankly. Um,
Mm.
uh,
Yeah.
you know, it is a path that, mm, maybe it's not for everyone.
Right.
I don't even know if it's
Well,
for
I
me.
mean, there's something to be said for that it is a special quality that people have because I mean, traditionally, um, magicians, shamans, healers, in different parts of the world were also like the musicians or the storytellers, right? So it makes sense. It taps into it, right? So,
Yeah. And
and when you're
oftentimes they sometimes are they're the broken people that
right,
that kind of were maybe the outcast. And then
yeah,
through their pain and the journey of their suffering, came back and said, I brought these things back from that dark place. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's totally in that Orphic tradition.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, uh, like Jimi Hendrix can communicate a lot more with a wah pedal and a guitar and an amplifier. than he ever does through the microphone.
Yeah.
I mean, put it all together and it's great. But like the notes that Hendrix is wailing on is communicating something that couldn't be communicated any other way, and everybody feels it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
yeah.
guy, Robert Dick, I think his name is, that did it's like a flautist, and he has a
Mhm.
jazz ensemble, and he did some Hendrix songs on one of his albums. I forget which one. Robert Dick is his name, and he
Yeah.
does Machine Gun.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and but to make all those sounds, like it took cellos and violins and all of the wah sounds and all of this other stuff, and you say, "Wow, man, Jimmy was really composing.
Hmm.
This is
And he
this
couldn't read
wasn't
music.
right, right." Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's not always uh, Paul McCartney learns a technique of doing, how do I do, go up the neck using triads or something, and he turns that into a song.
Right.
Most of us are trying to get there, to try to do these, to be inventive, and someone who's
Mhm.
just they have the gift.
You're talking about Blackbird.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's an
Uh,
exercise, really, and he just
yeah.
he just turns it
Yeah.
into a beautiful, incredible song.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's crazy. Uh, I was gonna bring this up because it's not something that comes up a lot in your book, because like I said, this is a lot of your own personal experience and stories that you collected from people directly. Um, uh, but I was thinking earlier today, not just Elvis, but I mean, there's a lot of musicians that have had some kind of UFO encounter, and I always kind of thought of that as um, the trickster nature of the phenomenon is
Mm.
going to present itself to people that nobody's going to believe.
Right, right.
But now I'm starting to think that the music probably has some part of it, because I mean, Hendrix himself had a UFO encounter, depending if you believe the sources those come from. And then the Moody Blues, John Lennon,
Yeah,
George Clinton. The list goes on and on. But I
yeah.
mean, none of
Sun
them
Ra,
was that.
Sun Ra,
Sun Ra. Yeah, I mean, Sun
and the
Ra
whole.
basically thought he was uh, he said he was from Saturn or
Right,
something like. Right.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had a whole story about it.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting connection. And what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to make the book anecdotal. So I didn't want to
Right.
say John Lennon had this experience, and Rick Wakeman had this experience. I did get bits of those things that are, in blurbs and stuff, but I wanted to tell stories, and I didn't really care about the celebrity level of the musician. It was like
Right.
whoever it was. Um, but it's funny because I think that, yeah, musicians are creative. I sent the book The Flip by Jeff Kripal to Peter Rowan, who's in the book. He's a
Mhm.
musician, songwriter, he's a legend, bluegrass legend. And he said to me, "Who is he writing this book for?" And I thought to myself, well, Peter has dakinis, convey songs to him in his dreams. So
Right.
he's already there. I was like, oh, of course, of course. Not to you, Peter. I mean, I wanted to show you the book, but this is really written to academics and to mainstream kind of, um, people in the universities that are steadfast in these fiefdoms of whatever it is that they're teaching. And but of course he wouldn't, because he receives music in a magic way. Um,
Hmm.
and I think it happens in both ways, that musicians are open to, because of their openness, um, they can make music manifest and make magic. And sometimes music is the carpet ride is where magic is made. So I don't know if that makes sense the way I said it, but sometimes out of music comes magic, and sometimes
Right.
out of magic is made music, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a feedback loop.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. You're right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
I'm thinking of like even, when you take a sacred plant and you hear music, and out of that music, you are going to have an extraordinary journey. You are
mhm.
going, and it will be profound, and it is not a joke, and it's not like, dude, man, I just got really high. It's nothing like that. It's super profound and a confrontation with, ultimately with yourself and the universe, and maybe one and the same.
Yeah, and it's kind of stepping outside reality and then bringing something back for everybody else to,
Yeah,
to
right.
consider.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
that's really cool. And there's so much of that in the book from a variety of perspectives. So it's really cool to see it all put together. And speaking of the Peter Rowan stuff, I mean, there was a part where you were coming up to see him in my neck of the woods, and I
yeah.
had to have a chuckle over you recounting your harrowing drive through Boston and
Oh
feeling
my
like,
God. Yeah, yeah. The little farm, that's what he said, Peter, that it's like the paths were for the animals, the farm
yes,
animals. And so I'm like, where am I going? Am I making a left? What is this
yeah.
right now?
A lot of downtown and the north end is like used to be farmers markets and squares and little carriage trails. So
Yeah,
they're all
yeah.
one way streets now, and it doesn't make any sense.
Right. And he's ridden with me a few times, and I think he's sort of like, can you drive? He has this,
Right,
because I drove late in New York, you don't have to have a license. You don't
right,
have to drive. I took the trains to school. I went to NYU, I took trains.
right,
Um, and I didn't drive a car really until 20 something.
right. And then you're in Boston, so God help you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, well, there are certain places where driving is, you need more than a license to drive, really.
Yeah, it's the for listeners, it is the single worst place in the universe to drive. Boston is terrible.
I've been cursed out like crazy in Boston. I mean, I've been cursed out I didn't understand when you have those where you're supposed to stop to let pedestrians walk. And
Right.
I kind of missed that. And so this guy pulls up next to me. He pulls up, rolls down he's got a car full of kids. I was with my son in the car. He rolls down the window. He goes, "Are you a fucking scumbag?" And I was like, "What?" I didn't even know what I did. And then I kind of realized it. But what I
Yeah.
said to him was, "My son is in the car. I don't want to, I wanted him to see a better behavior." I said, "Is that the way you talk with kids in your car?" And that's all. I just went away. But it was like cursed me out, the guy,
Yeah.
It was in Salem, Massachusetts, by the way.
Yeah, Salem's not fun to drive around in either. I'm there pretty regularly, and I lived there for a little while. But
Cool architecture.
yeah, and it's a walkable town, which is nice. So
Yes.
whenever possible, didn't drive. I walked, and it made my life a lot easier. Um, but yeah, I mean, you shouldn't feel bad about getting yelled at because we're all massholes up here. Like that's the road rage is strong in this part of the world. So
No, it was better getting yelled at than getting a knife pulled on you. So I'll take that.
oh yeah, yeah. Every city has their own challenges, I suppose. About a little bit of both. People in Boston are afraid to come to my hometown. Like Worcester has such a bad reputation. So,
What could be worse to?
but yeah,
What could be worse to?
yeah,
Well, I live in Brooklyn, so my brother says you live so far away. He lives in New Jersey, and I say, you know, you live as far away from me as I live from you.
yeah,
Do you realize that, right? Like, he says you live in the middle of nowhere, and I'm like, we live the same distance away. I don't
right,
understand what you're saying.
right.
You get in a car and you come here.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just what, two bridges to get there.
It's actually super easy. It's,
Right,
you
yeah,
can go through Staten Island and get to New Jersey,
yeah,
and it's like we're on a no traffic day, we're 40 minutes away.
right, right,
So it's
yeah,
it's kind of silly.
It is kind of funny, and we're spoiled up here in the Northeast because I talk to people sometimes from the Midwest that drive like 2 hours to go to a bookstore or something.
Right, right, right. Yeah, we have culture. It's like
And we're like,
we
I
have
don't want to go to my brother's house. He's 45 minutes away. Screw that.
right, right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's so much great stuff and the density of where we live. We're lucky. We are. We're very lucky like that.
Yeah, yeah, we're spoiled. Um, okay, so winding down here, I did want to talk a little bit more about Peter Rowan.
Yeah.
How was it when you first met him? Because I understand you've known him for quite a while now.
Yeah, I met him through it's funny. It's there's a crazy long story. I'll make it short. A friend of mine is an artist, and he does these portraits. He's Guatemalan. He's half indigenous, and he does these portraits with New York City Metro cards. He also
Hmm.
uses gold gild. And I'm in his studio. It's a Friday night, kind of drinking a few beers, hanging out. And one of the portraits he did, I'll send them to you. I'll send you some portraits.
Okay.
He it's a portrait of this. It's an American Indian, indigenous face. And I said, "Oh, who's that guy?" And he says, "Oh, you don't know who that is?" So no, I don't know who that is. Who is it? He says it's this guy Ernie Panicoli. So Ernie Panicoli, it turns out, um, is half a Cree, and he is from Brooklyn, and half Italian, given his name. And he he was a photographer that for the hip hop groups, and he was a major
Hmm.
photographer and got them in their most candid, you know, manner, and he got amazing pictures. A lot of that has to do with who he is. He came from places like they came from. They respected him. Anyway, I meet Ernie because I was doing articles on, I was for a local newspaper on indigenous artists.
Hmm.
He was this great guy. We had a great conversation. I wrote an article about him, and calls me up and he goes, Ernie's an intense guy. He's got a great sense of humor, but I didn't know him too well. He goes, do you want to meet an international music star? And I said, yeah, sure. To write an article, but you have to take care of her. And I said, of course I will. He goes, I know I'm talking to you because I know you would. Anyway, he introduces me to this woman, Jungchin Lamo, who's a
Hmm.
Tibetan musician, composer, and she's unique, Jungchin, because it's traditional, but she'll play with like a Russian piano player or flamenco guitar players. She's extraordinary. I highly recommend checking out her stuff.
And she's in the
Anyway,
book as well.
she's in the book. Yeah. And
Right, right.
it's funny when I met her, I did a phone call. It was during COVID, and she's, dressed in like a bikini outfit, and she has like a pearl on her head. Her head is wrapped up in some kind of bun thing with like a piece of jewelry. Totally magical. It's like a genie. And as I'm speaking to her, she's praying because Tibetans pray all times. And anyway, I had read that she played with Peter Rowan. And I said, oh, so can you tell me about your experience with Peter? And she says, do you want to meet him? And I said, yeah, of course, I'd love to. I never beg anyone to introduce me
Right.
to the famous star they played with. So through this series of kind of totally unplanned things, I met Peter. And I would say it was emotionally powerful because I'd known his music. I was a fan of his. And Peter is a raconteur, he's a kind of poet. He's an extraordinary person. So he knows he's blowing your mind. He's played with Bob Dylan, played with, Jerry Garcia, played with Bill Monroe
Yeah.
and the whole host of luminaries. And he's got these great stories and stuff. And it was just triggering, dreams. And, I'm telling him, you know, Pete, I had a dream about you last night. It's like, no, no, I mean, not that kind of dream. I mean, I had this inspiring dream about you. And
Yeah.
anyway, it just sparked. I wrote a book called Falling from Trees. He wrote a poem in like 1975 called Falling from the Trees. We just
Hmm.
found these connections together, and I think we enjoyed talking to each other.
Hmm.
And I said, Pete, I was writing an article for him for a magazine. And I said, once we get this done, I think I have a larger project. Would you be interested? And I told him about the project, which was the spirituality of music. You know,
Right.
uh, uh, what are the roots of music? And the questions I asked him were, he answered the question in like 2 hours. He goes, did I answer your question? I said, there's really no answer to the question, but he gave this really poetic, written word worthy response,
Yeah.
which I knew he would because he's such a interesting and learned person. So yeah, that's my Peter Owen story from seeing a portrait in my friend's studio, a series of introductions that were not prompted by me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like I said, that's how this like whole synchronicity and weird kind of phenomena stuff goes. It's just it's magic, really. It's magical. It's almost you manifested this into your life, right? So
Once you open yourself to it, right? Isn't it that
yeah.
way? It's once you look at it, it looks back. And if you're, I don't know, there's a vibe and an energy you bring and a vibration level to things. And some people can't find, there's no problem that doesn't have a solution.
Hmm.
And, sometimes you may find yourself just kind of drawing in people and meeting people and, like the way we met, and you
Yeah.
just kind of come upon like-minded and they become transformational to your life experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all enriching when you're working from like a cooperative perspective. And I think in today's divisive world, it's heartening to see the calls for cooperation and empathy and understanding with one another. Because I mean,
Yeah,
I guess that's what the harmony is all about. So yeah,
great point.
yeah. Well, I'm very happy that we had this conversation and to have met you because it's just kind of this all came together pretty quickly, and I enjoyed reading the book and enjoyed talking to you just as much, maybe even more, because I feel like we're new friends now. So
Yeah, no, it's
we're
really my
paisanos now.
honor. Yeah, exactly. We're paisanos.
Yeah,
That's what's the other compare.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, no, it's great to thank you for reading the book, for taking the time. It means
yeah,
a lot to me, and you asking great questions and reading it deeply and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about it on the program. It was fun, and but I do appreciate it as well.
yeah. Of
And we'll do
course.
we'll do it again. We'll stay in touch.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So if people want to find you online, what's the best way to like look at your work online and see your other books and purchase this one?
Thank you. It's MikeFiorito.com. And so if you'll provide it in the transcript notes and stuff,
Right.
but it's just my name, MikeFiorito.com. That's probably the best way. And then you'll see all of the books. You'll see descriptions of the books and some uh, review comments, short synopsis of each book. And I'd love to hear from anyone who has questions or would like to talk more about the books and uh, uh, buy the books as well. More than
Yeah.
happy to make that happen.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think this has been great, and I think my listeners will really enjoy it. So thank you again for coming on.
Well, thank you, AP. I got it right at the end. And
Yeah.
let's be in touch. Have a great night. I know it's probably late and we're in the same time zone. So
Yeah.
have a great night and we'll talk soon.